A flight attendant was killed in her home, and in her final moments, she used her last ounce of strength to write the initials of her assailant in her own blood. However, when the police traced the blood letters to the suspect, they discovered that this individual had a solid alibi. Could it be that the clues left by the victim didn't actually point to the name of the killer? If not, what was the meaning behind the clues she left behind? Would the police be able to unravel this mystery and solve the case successfully? Hello, everyone, and welcome to BC Storytime. Today, we're diving into the twisting murder case known as the Blood Letters. The victim in this case was Karen Pinnell, born on February 10, 1964, in Landstuhl, Germany. At the time of the incident, she was 39 years old. Karen had a successful career as a professional model, but she grew tired of the industry's rules. In 1991, she made a career change and became a flight attendant for an American airline, moving to Odemar, Florida. She had been in the aviation industry for 12 years, and life was relatively smooth, except for her love life. Although she had no shortage of suitors, she had never met the right person. That changed when she turned 39. Karen met a man named Tim, and they quickly fell in love. Their personalities clicked, and they got engaged. However, just weeks before their wedding, an unexpected tragedy shattered their plans. On the morning of October 11, 2003, at 10:30 a.m., the Odemar Police Department received a distress call from a man who sounded shaky.
We have paramedics on the way. What's the problem? I don't know. She's laying here. She did what? She's laying here. Is she conscious? No. Is she breathing? I don't know. She is laying on the floor. There's blood everywhere.
The police rushed to the crime scene, which was covered in blood. A woman lay on the kitchen floor with multiple stab wounds, showing clear defensive injuries on her hands and arms. It was evident that the victim had engaged in a fierce struggle with her assailant before her death. There were no signs of forced entry at the scene, and an unfinished pizza box was on the kitchen table, indicating a delivery time of 8:48 p.m. on October 10th. The preliminary conclusions were as follows. Karen was killed between 8:48 p.m. on October 10th and 10:30 a.m. on the 11th, and the killer likely entered Karen's home with her consent, as there were no signs of forced entry. However, these findings were not enough for the police to crack the case. A diligent officer noticed something crucial: 3 letters written in blood on the cabinet door closest to Karen. Upon examining Karen's fingers, they confirmed that these 3 letters were indeed her final attempt to identify her killer. It was one of those chilling moments often depicted in movies and TV shows where a dying message is left behind. So, the police immediately questioned the caller, Tim, to gather more information about the events leading up to the crime. Of course, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Tim might be the suspect. After all, in murder cases, the most common suspects are often those closest to the victim. According to Tim's account, he had visited Karen's place around 7 p.m. on the 10th to discuss wedding plans. However, since Karen had some work to finish, he only stayed for about half an hour, leaving around 7:30 p.m. After returning home, Tim spent the evening playing games with his roommate George. He kept at it until the next morning, when he was suddenly awakened by a call from one of Karen's coworkers, who asked if Tim was with Karen since she hadn't shown up for work, and her phone had been unreachable. Worried about Karen's well-being, Tim rushed to her house, where he noticed the garage door partly open with bloodstains on it. Alarmed, he entered the house and found Karen's lifeless body on the floor. That's when he called the police. To confirm Tim's alibi, the police immediately verified his roommate George's account, and George indeed confirmed that Tim had been with him the entire night of October 10th. This led the police to eliminate Tim as a suspect. However, just before they let Tim go, they casually asked, "Do you have any idea who might have harmed Karen?" It was a routine question, but unexpectedly, Tim mentioned a name that matched the abbreviation written in blood. According to Tim, Karen had an ex-boyfriend named Rocky. When the police heard the name Rocky, it sounded familiar, but they couldn't place it right away. So, they had their colleagues at headquarters check on this Rocky and discovered that he had a history of drug abuse and domestic violence issues. On June 3, 2002, Karen had even called the police to report an attempted break-in, and the person in question was Rocky, who was her boyfriend at the time. With multiple criminal records and a name that perfectly matched the blood letters, the police were almost certain that Rocky was the prime suspect. They drove for over an hour to reach Rocky's home, but when they mentioned Karen, Rocky remained indifferent and somewhat repulsed. He admitted to having been in a relationship with Karen in the past, but since they broke up, he had no contact with her. He had moved on, had a new girlfriend, and was enjoying a happy life with a son. Rocky wanted nothing to do with Karen anymore. Faced with the direct question, "Did you kill Karen?" Rocky was initially shocked and quickly denied any involvement. However, when the police presented him with a photograph bearing his name written in blood, Rocky's expression changed from surprise to anger. He loudly exclaimed that someone was framing him for the crime. Rocky then vigorously defended himself, claiming that on the evening of the 10th, he had returned home around 6 p.m., and had been drinking all night until around midnight when he went to bed. He woke up around 9 a.m. on the 11th. Standing by Rocky's side, his girlfriend corroborated his story. Convinced that Rocky was not the killer, the police took his fingerprints and DNA before leaving his home. With Rocky ruled out as a suspect, the case investigation hit a roadblock. The clues left by the victim, Karen, were insufficient to identify a suspect. So, the police decided to change their approach, considering whether the 3 blood letters might have a different meaning. The police conducted a more thorough examination of the 3 blood letters, which led to the discovery of additional details. Beneath the 3 blood letters were some dried bloodstains. Forensic analysis revealed that the 2 sets of bloodstains had been separated by at least a 3-hour span. This indicated that Karen had written the blood letters long after the initial attack. However, according to Karen's autopsy report, she had suffered a total of 16 stab wounds to her heart and neck, wounds severe enough to cause instant death. This made it clear that the so-called dying message couldn't have been written by Karen herself. Instead, it was a ploy by the killer to frame Rocky. Even though this tactic temporarily deceived the police, it also revealed the killer's identity. Based on this evidence, the police were confident that the killer had an intimate connection with Karen. Ordinary friends would not have known about Karen's ex-boyfriend, let alone thought of framing him. The police shifted their focus to investigate men who had been intimately involved with Karen. At this crucial juncture, while officers were digging into Karen's social circles, they came across her phone records that included extensive communication with someone identified as Pilot. Further investigation revealed that this Pilot was a married man who had a romantic relationship with Karen, but it was not integrated into their daily lives. Could it be possible that this Pilot committed the murder to conceal an extramarital affair? The police thought it was a plausible motive. They promptly brought the Pilot in for questioning, during which he admitted to his past involvement with Karen. However, he maintained that he was out of the country on a flight mission on the night of October 10th. To corroborate the Pilot's alibi, the police checked his flight records, which confirmed his statement. As a result, the Pilot was also cleared of suspicion. After 3 consecutive suspects were ruled out, the police's confidence wavered. However, a breakthrough came when a woman named Catherine walked into the police station with information. According to Catherine, Karen had a previous husband named Jeff. When they divorced, the judge granted custody of their child to Karen. Consequently, Jeff had been making monthly child support payments. In recent months, Karen had asked for an increase in support payments, and Catherine suspected that Jeff might have been unable to cope with the escalating financial demands, leading him to kill Karen. Upon questioning, Jeff remained composed and claimed that on October 10th, he had gone diving in Miami with friends, over 400 miles away. He provided receipts related to the diving trip, which the police verified to be genuine. As a result, Jeff's involvement was also ruled out. With all suspects cleared and no new leads, the case grew cold and unsolved over time. It wasn't until 3 years later, in August 2006, when a rookie police officer arrived at the station with an eager learning attitude. He began reviewing unsolved case files from the past few years, and as he reached Karen's case, his sharp eye caught something peculiar. The autopsy report stated that there were no undigested food remains in Karen's stomach. This might seem insignificant at first, but remember that at the crime scene, there was a half-eaten pizza. The police had assumed it was Karen's dinner, but the autopsy report clearly indicated an empty stomach. The rookie officer immediately reported this finding to his superiors and conducted a meticulous scan of the entire pizza box. To their astonishment, they discovered a fingerprint on the box that did not belong to Karen or the delivery person. The police sent this fingerprint for analysis. When the results came in, they were shocked to see that the print belonged to none other than Tim, Karen's former fiancé, the person initially cleared of suspicion. The police then initiated a background check on Tim and unearthed a startling revelation. Tim had a 12-year prison record. His prison records revealed an attempt to kidnap and murder a security escort personnel back in 1990 when he worked as a bodyguard. Despite the failure, Tim was sentenced to 12 years in prison. With knowledge of Tim's criminal history, the police arrested him immediately. However, Tim refused to admit his involvement in Karen's murder, remaining silent despite intense questioning. His cunning behavior matched the police's earlier expectations of his craftiness. So, the police decided to start with George, who had provided a false alibi for Tim that night. Under intense police questioning, George quickly spilled the beans. Around 9:30 p.m. on October 10th, he received a call from Tim, who confessed to killing Karen and asked for George's help in providing an alibi. George, who was well aware of Tim's attempted murder history, was frightened of Tim and didn't dare to refuse. Given Tim's violent past, George agreed to lie for him, especially after hearing that Tim had just committed murder. With the evidence they had now gathered, the police were poised to convict him. They pieced together the sequence of events as follows. The police surmised that when Tim was dating Karen, he had likely concealed his criminal history from her. However, when Karen accidentally discovered Tim's sordid past, she decided to break up with him. Tim was unwilling to let Karen go, knowing that she had a good income, a car, a house, and an attractive appearance. All of this would relieve Tim from his financial worries, so he visited Karen's home on the day of the murder to try and reconcile. Their argument escalated in the kitchen, and in a fit of rage, Tim grabbed a nearby kitchen knife and violently stabbed Karen. Afterwards, to cover up his tracks and shift blame, Tim thought of Karen mentioning her ex-boyfriend, Rock, who had a history of multiple crimes. Tim believed Rock would be a perfect scapegoat. He grabbed Karen's finger, dipped it in blood, and wrote ROC on the nearby cupboard. Tim then called George, threatening him to provide a false alibi. After these gruesome acts, Tim felt hungry, so he heartlessly ate the leftover pizza near Karen's lifeless body before leaving her home. To eliminate suspicion, he returned to Karen's home the next day and reported the incident to the police. This was the approximate sequence of events leading up to Tim's gruesome act. On October 24, 2007, 4 years after the crime, Tim's case went to trial. In court, Tim continued to deny any involvement and refused to confess to the charges. However, the evidence against him was compelling, and his conviction did not depend on his admission of guilt. Ultimately, a jury of 12 members unanimously found him guilty of first-degree murder. They also voted 7-5 in favor of sentencing him to death. In the United States, sentencing someone to death is not an easy process. After weighing various factors, the judge ultimately decided to sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This is one of the most severe punishments besides the death penalty. That concludes this case. What are your thoughts on it? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. Lastly, take care of yourself. See you next time.